Calling to order this meeting of the Parowan City Planning and Zoning Commission for January 3rd, 2024. It's 6 p.m. Do we have any conflicts with any of the items on the agenda?
No.
No. Thank you. No conflicts. Next item is approval of the minutes from December 20th, 2023. Any comments from anybody?
I saw no conflicts or errors.
I didn't either.
So I have a question. So I'm either losing my mind or it was a different meeting. I thought we talked about writing code for accessory dwelling units in the last meeting. A short discussion that talked about, we've talked about it for a long time. Are we now being asked to do that? And I thought the answer was yes, and there's no mention of that in the minutes at all. Does anybody else remember that, or am I?
I'll check my notes.
Accessory dwelling unit? Well, I think that there was the question with it on the application, that they had put it that way.
Yeah, that was different. This
is different,
This was
oh.
specifically about whether we should proceed to write. Oh.
Oh.
Okay.
My notes show on item number 4, when the girls were up, that
Yeah,
we talked about a DU code.
We did?
Yeah.
Well, as it exists, right? Or
Specify
doesn't
what
exist.
it was actually said.
Right,
And you, on your comments at the end, you talked about House Bill 206.
yeah.
Anyway, that's all I have.
Okay, well. Was there? Well, we had an application last meeting that brought it to the forefront.
Lizzie's here
But
again,
it's-
wanted to expand.
It's also state code now that requires that. Okay, I'd entertain a motion on the minutes.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from the last meeting dated, I don't have that in front of me,
December
sorry.
20?
December 20th.
Oh, thank you. December 20th, 2023.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Judy, would you capture in the minutes my comments about whether we talked about that or not, just as a placeholder? The next item in the agenda, the Bike Utah overview of the active transportation plan, has been moved to January 17th meeting, which will be a public hearing.
I'm sorry, Larry, the last part, is going to be a
It
public?
will be a public hearing.
Oh, boy. Lucky me, huh? Or lucky Heather.
No, that's
Well-
you.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just letting Jerry know.
So that shouldn't be too bad because you've got an expert presenter that's going to talk about the active transportation plan. And I'll fill you in on some details for the rest of that if you'd like.
Unless we nominate Heather on the next one.
Next item on the agenda is the annual election of the chair and chair pro tem for the Planning and Zoning Committee. I'll accept nominations in that regard.
I nominate Larry Zajac
I
as the chairman.
second that.
All in favor of Larry Zajac as the chair?
Aye.
Is that 3 ayes?
Well, 2 ayes on him. I have these 2.
Okay, well, thank
4.
you all very much.
I'll be here all week.
And Chair Pro Tem, I'd accept nominations in that regard.
Heather?
You really want me to do it?
You make an excellent job. What do you think, Larry?
I think you do a good job.
You're well-read. You're well-versed. You're always here.
Okay, fine.
And you love dogs.
Okay, I'll do it.
All right, all in favor of Heather as the Chair Pro Tem for Planning and Zoning? Aye. The ayes have it. Thank you.
Yep. I'll make sure I bring a cushion next week so I can be seen.
So we should talk more.
Okay, great. No, I mean, that sounded horrible.
No, I just mean
Yeah.
before meeting, before some of the, if I'm gonna be gone.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Oh, did somebody second that? Did
I
somebody second it?
second.
All right.
Oh, I made the motion? Oh, that's right.
All in favor of Heather as Chair Pro Tem?
Aye.
All right.
Aye. The ayes have it. Thank you. Judy? Well, so this next item is a result of discussions in the last meeting about, I know specifically internal, accessory dwelling units. And I went to look in the minutes to find the discussion to see if we were also talking about external accessory dwelling units. And so Dan, do you happen to recall?
Repeat your question. I have lots of thoughts, but I wasn't, what was your question?
Well, so we had that discussion last time
About ADUs?
about ADUs and should
Yeah, I
we
thought
write
maybe
those,
it was a little broader.
should we wait? And it was a, no, you guys should go ahead.
So where we left, yeah, and I apologize. I'm not the sharpest right now. I'm a little sick, and I feel like I'm on a NyQuil high. I do not have any drugs in my system, and I am past the point of, I've been sick for quite a while, and I'm now getting better. So I feel, anyways.
Oh, I'm glad for that.
But I'm here. I'm just a little bit cloudy. So if I remember right, we were talking about ADUs, and what I mentioned was due to recent legislation, we need to incorporate the new law or rule that the state passed that essentially forces us to allow internal ADUs in any residential zone. And there's a lot more to that code than that, but it's not really consistent with our current code, so we need to take a look at that at a minimum to make our code at least not in conflict with state code. And I thought that we also should maybe have a conversation about ADUs in general, in possibly different zones, maybe only in certain zones. I don't know. We have a lot of times we have people that want to do a casita or a mother-in-law building or something in an R2 area, and R2 is designed for two-family homes, except for per our current definition, that would only be limited to what we would traditionally have as a duplex. And I'm saying, what's the difference between a duplex and a single-family house with a casita in the backyard in terms of impact on the city and the residences and all of that stuff? It's just that our code only would say a traditional duplex because it says building, not buildings are allowed in R2. And I'm just saying, we're having more requests as people are trying to find some creative ways to have affordable housing, to have their kids or their elderly parents live on site with them, and our code is kind of a little bit rigid or clunky in this regard, and so I figured we could have the conversation about both ADUs, which we need to, and maybe expand that to ADUs in general. That was my thought.
Okay, thank you. So with that said, I didn't come prepared specifically to talk about external ADUs, but in general, we'll cover a lot of the things that Dan's mentioned. So I've brought you a copy of the Utah Land Use Institute accessory dwelling unit presentation that they've used for at least all of this year. And, well, there you go, March 2023. So that's when this was written.
And it was written to help cities deal with the new IADU requirements.
Right. And I'm going to walk through some of probably all of the real specific things about the internal, this is internal ADU state code. And that code, for reference, if you care to read it at some point or refer to it, is 10-9A-530. And the title is Internal Accessory Dwelling Units. So this presentation does an outstanding job of running through and discussing lightly the requirements and so on in the state code. But here we go. So in definitions, so an internal ADU is internal at the time the dwelling unit is created, and it has to be within the footprint of the primary dwelling. And the purpose for the long-term rental has to be 30 consecutive days or more. So they're specific. You can't have one if it's going to be a short-term rental. It's going to be a consecutive long-term, 30 consecutive days or more. And they define a primary dwelling as a detached single-family dwelling. And the primary dwelling has to be occupied by the owner of record of that residence. And you could convert an attached garage into an internal ADU if it shares a common wall with the house. So it can't be attached at the roof, you know, with the carport separating, say, the garage from the home. It's got to be a common wall with the house. And in terms of zoning, the state allows it for any area zoned for residential use. They may have the word primarily in there, but I don't have that in front of me. Let me see. Yeah, they do. In any area zoned primarily for residential use. And it is a permitted use then in those zones, and there can be no restrictions or requirements for the construction or use of one internal accessory dwelling unit. And then as we go on through this, here's some things that the municipality or the city cannot do. So they cannot require or restrict a lot size. They cannot restrict or require a certain street frontage.
What, later? What was the last part?
Street frontage.
Street frontage.
So you're thinking about it, we're thinking this is an existing home that's already there, so you can't go in and go, well, you know, we need 75 feet and you've only got 60, so you can't have an internal dwelling unit. They're saying if you've got a home or a residence already, pretty much you can have an internal ADU.
But on the lot size thing, cities can restrict, if you can say, accepting a minimum lot of 6,000 square feet. They do have a carve out for that.
Okay, yeah, and that's yes. And so just so you all know, I'm reading some highlights. I'm not getting into the nitty-gritty details of all of this. But yes, you're right, Dan. There has to be internal we can't require internal connectivity, whatever that means. And the city's regulation of architectural elements has to be consistent with whatever other architectural requirements we have for single-family residences or dwelling units. And the internal ADU must comply with all applicable building health and fire codes. And this creates a sticky wicket in some cases, especially on older homes. One of those requirements is emergency egress windows. And you're not going to find that in this presentation except as a footnote somewhere, I think. But there's another piece of code somewhere that points to that requirement. Oh. So a city can prohibit separate utility meters for an internal ADU. And it can require that the ADU not change the external appearance of a single-family dwelling unit. the city can require additional parking, and there's quite a bit to that. And that is in the state code that I referred you to. It's in 10-9A530, and then the subparagraphs are 4, F, and I. The city can prohibit IADUs in mobile homes. The city can require a permit or license for renting an IADU. And I looked at a case where I think it's Kaysville. They only require a permit or a license to rent an ADU if you're not renting it to a family member. And there are some areas where the city can prohibit IADUs, and again, there's quite a discussion about that. It's in that presentation, and it's in 10-9A-530. That's that same code, and this subparagraphs are 4C, I, and I guess are 1 and 2, depending how you read that. The city can prohibit an IADU if the lot size is less than 6,000 square feet. They can prohibit the rental of an IADU if it's for less than 30 consecutive days. So if it looks like it's turning into a short-term rental, that can be prohibited. And there's some teeth in that, in the code. The city can also prohibit rental if there's no primary owner in residence on the property. Now this is the teeth in that whole business about renting it and so on. The city can hold a lien against the property. And again, there's quite a section on that, and that's that same code, subsection 5, I guess. And then the city can record a notice of an IADU on property with the county recorder, and I won't get into more details on that, but if, let's just say you want to put in an IADU, you come in and you get a building permit, the city can go and put on record basically a notice that says there's an IADU with this property, and it can only be used and rented in accordance with current city code. Now, all that said, that's really the highlights of the internal accessory dwelling unit code. And for our discussion, I'd like to hear concerns, pros, cons, your thoughts on this. So if we took, and so for example, let's just say we said the state code seems pretty solid, and that we could adopt that into our code as almost as an internal ADU code that just mirrored practically the state code. And then I would say, now what else would we put in that? What else would our concerns be that we might want to put in there in Parowan City Code to do whatever? So one thing to point out as I don't want to go too far over that bridge tonight, I don't think, because I think we can have this same kind of a discussion for external accessory dwelling units in another meeting. But at this point, state code code in Kaysville, which evidently must comply with state code, or I presume so, an IADU over a garage is not allowed. So we have discussions about barn dominiums and things like that around here, and so if you don't have a primary residence on the property, you wouldn't be able to have an external ADU, and a barn or a garage is not going to be considered a primary dwelling unit. So, well, you put a barn dominium up and somebody wants to put a house up later, it's considered an ADU. So if you, well, no, a barn dominium is a barn, or a garage dominium is a garage, and it's got a condo over the top of it. that's an accessory dwelling unit. External. Or an
This
external.
states that
Yeah,
if it's a detached garage, that you can't have,
Right, this, what I'm saying now is that that's for an external accessory dwelling unit.
yeah.
And you can't, what I'm saying is,
But is that is correct, that a detached garage cannot have an apartment above.
right. It's not considered an internal accessory dwelling unit. Now, we, as a commission and a city, we need to work through that problem. That's at Kaysville.
But that's what I was
Well-
gonna say, be considered an external.
Right, and that's what I'm saying.
So it isn't
Origin-
totally prohibited.
I'm moving that discussion
Okay.
from internal for this particular note to external as just to demonstrate a point that you can have internal by state code, but not external. And if, by state code, an external ADU, external would be a living unit over a garage, would be an external accessory dwelling unit.
One of the things I just noticed, one of the things that I noticed that I wanted to comment on is, prohibit renting the ADU for fewer than 30 consecutive days. What if the primary owner lives in the ADU? Would then the house not be permitted, you know what I mean? Would the house be permitted to be rented less than
and-
30 days, or no?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, we can.
Or is that something that we would address as,
Right, I think that would need to be addressed. I don't think the state code addresses it unless we strictly interpret it.
I mean, I would, by the way the state code's written, it's saying that, you know, the primary resident has, or the primary owner has to be a resident.
But I think that's talking about construction of an ADU, and in order to allow construction of an ADU, that would have to be the case? Is that, I could be wrong.
Yeah, where are you reading, Heather?
So it says an internal,
Which-
it's the second page, the double I.
Okay,
An internal accessory dwelling unit is an accessory dwelling unit that is within the footprint of the primary dwelling. Detached dwelling unit occupied as a primary residence of the owner. For the
right,
purpose of-
so, I read that, and if I wanted to.
Oh, okay, and so it doesn't matter. The way I'm reading that, it wouldn't matter if the primary owner lived in the house or lived in the ADU. The purpose is for it to be offered for rent for 30 consecutive days or longer, so. Internal ADUs would not be compliant as short-term rentals, no matter where the primary owner resides within the structure.
Well, on the lot.
Yeah,
On the
with it, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So am I to take it that these state imposed ordinance changes and whatnot are going to take priority and precedent over your local zoning ordinances?
Well, we can't be more strict, so if they allow them, we have to allow them.
We can't be more strict? I think we can be more strict.
But in this case, it says that it is allowed, and it does trump our code.
It means we can't
There was a huge fight over it.
outright ban them.
There was a huge fight over this for that very reason, because this effectively, the state preempts the local zoning authority. And there was a huge fight about it, but yeah, we have to allow them, because the state specifically says we shall. This is this new territory that they're starting to crack, and they threatened to make all ADUs, and they said, okay, well, we'll just do internal ADUs, but some states are going beyond that and just saying you will allow all ADUs.
So my general belief is, beyond this discussion, that we as a city need to sit down and decide what our path is going to be, because this missing middle housing and just housing affordability in general is moving forward. We're gonna have to revise code, and so we really need to get on with some things and to decide how we wanna do that. There are some things at the state level that, because we are such a small city, we can fall under the radar. And because there's some things in their code that doesn't make sense. Some of the code at the state level talks about if you're close to a mass transportation system, and we're not. And so that part doesn't work. And so you can't catch a bus across town or a train to Cedar City or somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But it's coming, and this is really just the tip of the iceberg. The other buzzword these days is upzoning, and upzoning is the concept of allowing higher density in your existing zones. So if you have an R1 that's one residential family unit, you might upzone to allow that to be subdivided to have 2 external ADUs or something, depending on the size of the lot. And we need to start thinking about some of those things. And
So I want to address this for Dave's concern. This is the state code. This is exactly how it reads. In any area zoned primarily for residential use, the use of an internal accessory dwelling unit is a permitted use, except as in certain subsections, a municipality, that's us, may not establish any restrictions or requirements. I mean, it specifically says cities cannot restrict this.
right.
It's allowed. I mean, so I'm saying we cannot say, but we're going to be more restrictive and then contradict the state law.
No.
It's not, we can't contradict when it specifically says cities cannot restrict this.
Right. That's like they say, you will have a general plan.
Right.
I mean, we have to have a general plan. It's not like we can not have one.
But like Larry said, I this is the tip of the iceberg. I believe that there's probably going to be a lot more legislation like that this year to try to fix the affordability problem.
Right. Well, that House Bill 206 is already in place. So I mean.
Yeah.
So a couple of notes that I made as I rattled through this, because I myself looked at the state code and I thought, well, it's not that bad. So one is how to enforce the intended use as a long-term rental. I mean, enforcement would be difficult at best. You're not going to knock on the door and ask to see people's IDs and who are you related to and that sort of a thing. So I do think we should go in as eyes wide open that this would be a bit of an honor system thing. So if anybody has any ideas on how that could be mitigated, that'd be great. A good discussion. And then, well, of course, how to prevent short-term rental use. I think there's teeth in that to prevent it. The question is how do you monitor that?
Did we, I know at one point there was talk about short-term rentals being required to have a business license. Was that just discussed, or is that something that's been, it's in place? Okay, so
That's the only part in our code that references short-term rentals. We don't have a short-term rental code, but we implemented the municipal TRT tax, and in that ordinance that implements the tax, it says that anybody who collects this tax and who's required to collect this tax has to have a business license.
right. So you've got people coming for the building permit to build an internal ADU. Obviously, at that time, they're notified the rules. And then you also have the short-term rental that has to come in and get a business license. And as you said, you can very well claim that if they if any of the regulations are violated, that the county can hold a lien against the home.
Right.
County or, what does it say, county or, yeah,
Yeah, the code for that's quite
municipality.
extensive, but yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, is policing it hard? Yeah. Can we have somebody who's on Airbnb periodically and checking to see? Yeah. But if you're notified up front and you want to roll the dice and take the risk and gamble doing a short-term rental when it's not allowed and without a business license, because if somebody comes in to get a business license for an IADU, it's obviously not going to be permitted and they're not going to get it. So, I mean, yeah, we can't, like you said, go knocking on everybody's doors, but we can at least be, if someone's going to come in and get the permit, the building permit to do it, check, this just clarification, signature, you break the rules, violate, you're getting a lien on your house.
Yeah, and I would suspect that people that would run an Airbnb or a
VRBO.
VRBO, that don't come in for a business license aren't gonna come in and call it an internal accessory dwelling unit either. They're just doing it.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of times if it's just family, nobody ever knows about it. My mom and dad live in the basement. And I always thought that was okay until, I don't know, 6 months ago.
Well, living in the basement but creating like a separation is two different things.
Okay.
Because whether you have, at least that's the way I see it, as creating an actual internal ADU is creating two separate living spaces underneath the one roof.
Okay, well, I'll just say, so in my home, there's a upstairs and there's a basement. If I close the door to the basement, it's got its own entrance and exit, and it's totally in a bathroom, and it's totally
Kitchen
separate.
facilities,
Kitchen?
et cetera.
There's no kitchen, but
Then it wouldn't be considered an ADU.
good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that bothered me, but it's not addressed in state code, and evidently is not a thing, and it concerned me that I always thought that this was sort of directed towards you get an internal ADU or an external ADU for that matter, and it was for the purpose of aging parents or sick relatives and that sort of a thing. And I thought, well, okay, that's great. And I go, how are you going to, you'll never be able to police that, because the first thing that happens is then when somebody passes or a situation changes, somebody moves into a home for long-term care somewhere, because they can't do it at the ADU any longer, and something happens and now the home goes up for sale. Now what happens? If there's nothing recorded with the county recorder that says this property has an accessory dwelling unit and must be rented in accordance with current city code, then there might not be any way to police that. I don't know how because you just can't follow it, right?
Well, it would all depend on if it was initially done correctly by a building code. I mean, I would think that if they're going to come in, okay, I'm in this situation right now where I'm contemplating going through this and creating an IADU in my house, because I have Jennifer and her daughter who has moved here to be a groomer, and there's no place for them to live. So I would have to come in, get the building permit, and at the time when the house sells later down the road, I would think that would have to be included in the realtor information.
Well, state code goes a step farther, and once it's recorded, it's going to show up on a title search and in the documents that the purchaser signs and so on and so on. So it would have to be disclosed, because at some point, some buyer might not be happy.
Well, and I think the main purpose of that, if I'm guessing at it, like who cares if there's two kitchenettes in a house? But you may have a renter there with renter's rights, that
Uh-huh.
would need to be disclosed upon the sale of a home. I think that's the reason.
And I think Jamie has said that that's dealt with the realtor.
I know nothing about renters' rights.
Yeah. I remember her bringing that up before.
Somebody wanna look?
You have rights, and you can't just kick them out without process and stuff. And if you sell your house and it's an established ADU and they're there, I think that's why it would be recorded against the title so that the buyer knows. I might be dealing with a potential renter that I might have to go through an eviction process if I don't want them there. I'm pretty sure that's why you would record something against the deed, but that's just what I'm guessing at. I don't know.
Well, I think it would be a good practice to do that so that it's, you know, it's not a secret, kinda like the Historical Preservation District. You know, whose responsibility is that to notify a buyer?
Because typically the seller would want to promote the fact, yeah, this house has all kinds of options. You could carve this out as a separate apartment, that's rental income, but why would we want to force them to disclose it? And I would think that would be why.
Yeah. Other comment? Need time to think about that?
So I have a question. Do we need to actually have, I guess depending on, do we want to have any restrictions on IADUs? Essentially, the state code says we have to allow them, and we can put certain restrictions. Not that we have to. So the question is if we are, the question is do we need to write IADU code or not, or should we just simply amend R1,
R2,
our A1 and R1? No,
we can't
because theoretically R2 and an IADU is totally permitted. It's 2 residential units within a building.
No, so, well, think about this. So, there's somebody in an R3 zone, let's just say, and they have on that property a single-family detached home. They can have an internal ADU, and it needs to be governed the same way all the rest of them are governed.
Right, but I'm saying there's nothing in our code that would prevent it now. So there's no conflict there now.
There's nothing that would prevent them.
If somebody came in to get a building permit to turn their single-family residential home into a single-family residential home with an internal ADU apartment in an R2 area, I'm going to say, great, here's your building permit. You just turned your house into a duplex. It just doesn't look like a traditional mirrored duplex, but it's it's a two-family residence now in that building in an R2 zone, and I would say that's approved.
Okay, but that unit that they turned into an IADU is rentable now. And I would think that would get recorded just like any other IADU.
No, what I'm saying is the problem with the new IADU code is a problem as it conflicts with our R1 zoning and A1 zoning. Primarily, that's the biggest problem, because our R1 zoning says you can have a single-family residence only. That's our problem. That's where our code now conflicts with this new state code.
Right, and obviously whoever the lobbying interests were that passed all this is.
Can you speak into the mic, please?
I don't know if they're on.
What if
I know they're
somebody can
very
hear me
low.
then? Obviously, the public policy behind the state code is the fact that I'm sure the lobbying interests for property owners and those that want to use their property for other than a single-family dwelling, because frankly, in reading through this, I was kind of shocked that you shall, and you must, and you will, and it's under the guise of not replicating sewer lines or power lines or, times are tough in Utah, the housing market's hard, so, hey cities, hey towns, you need to allow these people to have accessory dwelling units. And it's pretty heavy-handed, actually, and it does conflict with the code. In fact, I would guess it conflicts with probably 90% of the codes, statewide, because, and not that public clamor is anything we can avoid, but I think the pressure on this body and the pressure on the mayor and the city council is gonna be, wait a minute, I just built our dream home. It's the largest investment we've ever had in our life, $485,000, and it's perfect. So you tell me the guy next door just turned his garage into a rental unit? Well, state code says so that's where I see the train wreck happening down the road. So I think we need to be careful, and as Dan points out, we need to find a way to marry what we have and what Parowan City's policies and interests are with what the state of Utah is trying to make us do.
Because the state is trying to make it a cookie cutter. They're trying to just make it something that applies to every municipality, and that is
right.
wrong.
And Parowan City is not West Valley.
Exactly.
or Draper or Tooele.
Right.
I mean, I don't know.
But back to my point, so this is in place. It went into effect in May of 2023. Do we want to have dedicated IADU code, or do we simply go in and modify our A1, R1A, and R1 zones and allow, specifically permit, IADUs? Oh yeah, it's going to be a process to update our code no matter what we do, but I'm saying, do we want to go through and write a whole new section of IADU code, or do we just modify those? It does allow us to put restrictions and stuff like that within their bounds, and if we want to do some of those restrictions, I would think we would want to write a section on IADUs. The restrictions it allows you to do are an extra parking spot that's off-prem.
Two, if they convert the garage.
Or if they convert the garage, you can make them come up with another one.
Well, it might be 2 or 3.
You can restrict to the lot size, which we don't have anything that goes that small anyways.
Utility meters, what do we
Utility meters.
So the guy on that R3 lot comes in and wants to build an IADU. Do you want to give him another water meter and another another electric meter? You can charge him an impact fee or not? All those things come into play.
And you can say only one ADU, not an additional one, and an additional one,
No, it
and an
says
additional
that.
one.
No, it says that in here.
Yeah.
ADU,
Yeah, it says there's only one ADU, and if like a home already contains an IADU, they can't add another.
But those are permitted restrictions, meaning we would have to restrict that.
Right.
We
okay,
allowed,
I see.
It's not an automatic restriction.
I'm seeing, I just read that, permitted restrictions, so yes.
So that's what I'm saying, we may want to...
Yes, I would agree with that. I would agree that if you have a home, one internal ADU is the max.
And the prohibit renting of an ADU for fewer than 30 consecutive days, that's a permitted restriction, not an automatic restriction. So some of those things we would want to consider putting in our own code if we were to establish it.
That 30 days or more for long-term rental is part of the definition of an ADU in the state code.
I know, but it specifically spells it out as a permitted restriction.
Maybe that's where my question came in. No, that still wouldn't work. No, I know what you're saying, because we read the front, but it is spelled out underneath that as well. So... It
says that it's created for the purpose of being offered for rent for 30 consecutive days. It doesn't say that it has to only be that. I think you could restrict it to that.
30 days or more.
Right. But it's created for the purpose of being offered for rent for 30 consecutive days or longer. That's why you're creating that ADU, but then it says you are allowed to restrict it to only that.
Yeah, I'm following you.
'Cause what happens when somebody says, I'm gonna create an ADU, and absolutely, this is a long-term rental, and then the house sells, and the next person comes in, and they're like, I can't find any long-term rentals, I'm gonna short-term this bad boy.
Right.
You can't tell me I can't. It's already there. Whereas if we have it specifically permitted or restricted, one of the nice things I thought that they added some color, because you read the exact code and you're like, what does that mean? But this land use document,
Yeah.
if you look at the little footnotes at the bottom, they actually color some of the things that are a little bit confusing. And one of the things that they add a little bit of color to that is they say that, you know, by requiring a license for a rental, it allows the city, I'm trying to remember because I read it, now I'm trying to see where it was. Maybe it's considerations for making land use decisions. Maybe that's what it is. Tips for implementing local recreation. That's what it is. It's the very last page. Tips for implementing local regulations. Requiring a rental license, which is expressly permitted by the statute, will allow municipalities and counties to identify where ADUs are located, making it easier to enforce any restrictions. So while I'm not a huge fan of just adding another permit that people have to do to rent something, the whole mechanism is designed that it gives you the ability to, when they do it, say, okay, are they following the rules or not? Because normally we wouldn't require a permit for somebody to rent their house, right?
Right. And Heather, that also, on that last page, item A, also speaks a bit to the part you're talking about. Also, part of the license process could include verifying that the applicant owns and occupies the home as a primary residence. And I don't know what the problem is if the homeowner decides to move into the
And I don't read it that way.
IADU and
I don't read it that way. I mean, the home in general, the structure, I'm reading that as the home as the structure, and that it can't be like a second home with an IADU, is how I would look at that.
yeah.
Yeah. But I don't think that reads that they have to live in the larger portion.
It doesn't say that anyway.
Yeah.
That's my point.
Which I don't think that would be, I own the house, I can live, if I want to live tiny, or in the small, in the basement, because it's cooler in the summer.
So Dan, in answer to your question about do we write ADU code or do we modify the other code, I hate to say this, but I think we do both. I think we need to loosen up the restrictions in our other codes so that they allow internal ADUs in the areas we want to do that, but I do think we need some of these guidelines and some of the restrictions that we would desire as a municipality to be spelled out specifically, and that's so that you can administer that across the counter. Somebody comes in and wants a permit, you can pull out the IADU code and go, is it allowed in this zone? Check, yes. And then go, okay, read all these things, these are the requirements, these are the things we need to verify, okay, you're good to go.
It also says it can be a conditional use.
That's what I was...
Conditional in the other zones.
Right, in the non-residential.
Because like in commercial, you can have like mixed use in commercial, right. And so that's why it says that you could leave it as
conditional or prohibited, so you have to define whether you're going to prohibit it in those non-residential zones or allow it.
Because it only forces us to allow them in residential zones.
Right.
Can I just suggest that I know there's a pretty robust group of city attorneys and city managers, and while we're cutting edge and we have the smartest planning commission in the state, I'll vouch for that, and mayor, that this is not an issue of first impression statewide, and if you'll allow me to reach out to a couple of offices that have 2 and 3 and 4 full-time city attorneys and planners, and because I can imagine they're not overly thrilled with this at all. And sometimes things get passed that then you look at it and say, because there are 1,000 variances of how this could be applied, not applied,
Interpreted.
or couldn't, or shouldn't, or you shall, and so I'd be happy to do that and come back to the next meeting with some examples of, but I don't think just relying on the state statute and the interpretation, which is well done, is gonna cut it. I think we have to have, as you say, and Dan and others have said, something in our code that is relevant to Parowan.
Exactly.
What Parowan residents want, it's what the citizens that own property in Parowan would want, and I think that ought to be the goal.
I would like to respond to that and just make it very clear that I'm very in support of this. So I don't know if you've got the vibe that there are people, or that we're all, like, against it, but I'm very in support of this, and I think that there are some restrictions that I think that we should minimize or to, but, I don't know. I'm Parowan.
No, I think,
I think
with all
what
land use
Scott-
planning issues, whether you're in favor of something or against something depends on which side of the street you're on. I mean, there are
Exactly.
people, I've been in towns that, are you kidding me? I can't have a kennel. I can't raise 14 hunting dogs in an R1. There are
Right.
people that are very supportive of that because they happen to have hunting dogs. So, and I know there are people that would love to do this for a number of reasons. Second income, moving, family in, increase the value of it if I can sell this as not only a home, but hey, to help make the mortgage payment, because the high cost of rent is like $2,000 right now for a dwelling. You can make the mortgage payment, potential buyer, just by buying my house, because it has an established internal, so there's gonna be strong feelings on both sides, I would predict.
I just think we need to be very careful about accepting government overreach and accepting something shoved down our throat that is tried one size fits all.
Yeah.
But what do you do
I don't-
about it, Dave? I mean,
Well, I guess you go to your legislators and tell them.
so, but do we not do anything because we don't like that they did this? And we do. I mean, that's what, January through March, we're fighting all kinds of laws like this, and some we get modified. This one got dramatically improved from what it was originally, but then it got passed, and it's like, so now what? Like, we have to implement it. I don't disagree at all. I'm just saying, it's now the law of the land, state law.
Well, laws can be changed and modified.
I mean, I don't think there's gonna be a mad rush.
Right, so, I understand this is gonna be a
A lengthy, ongoing
heated
discussion.
topic and discussion for quite some time, but it's our responsibility as a city and as a body to have the discussions.
Yeah,
We can't just ignore it, bury our head in the sand and
right.
move on. If we're not gonna change something, when it comes time to vote, I'm pretty sure you all will vote your mind, in spite of any of the discussion. It's immaterial to me. If 4 of you are against it and I'm for it, I'll vote yes. And that's good, and it won't pass, and we'll move on. It's not a personal thing, it's just, it's discussion. So let's have the healthy discussions, the difficult discussions, and figure out where to go. And I, for one, I would entertain a motion to table this discussion until Scott can come to the next meeting 2 weeks from now. Actually, I'd rather it be one more than that, so I
And
can...
Dan, will you check with some city managers as well?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
And then, all in favor?
Aye. Oh,
Did I make a motion? I did.
You asked somebody to make.
you asked somebody to make a motion, but nobody did.
Yeah.
Wes just
Okay.
jumped in and seconded it.
Did you make a motion?
To table the discussion until,
Call Judy.
For Scott Burns to do some research? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
The ayes have it. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much for that. I think maybe we could. I don't know the direct answer to that. I've seen some code and some things like that where you can restrict the number of something in a town, like short-term rentals or other things like that. But without some research, I'm not sure.
That'll be an interesting discussion. I've got mixed emotions about it myself.
Okay, we are on to member reports. Let's start down at Dan's end.
No, I think we're on the right track. These people are trying to get creative due to the pressures that we're dealing with. So whatever Parowan wants to do and identify, we need to be very clear about it and make sure that our code isn't vague.
Our code is not vague.
Not vague.
Yeah.
And doesn't have, it's not like, maybe it seems like you could do it here in this circumstance, but other here it isn't. Let's just make sure that we're very clear about whether we want to allow these things, and we have some, what is our strategy as we look forward, looking at updating our general plan, and as we look at zoning and where we want to have R2 and R3 and what it looks like, and let's just plan for it. That's all. No, I don't have anything else to add.
By the way, on this discussion, I did take a look at our general plan, and it actually sort of supports the looking at low-cost housing and middle housing and stuff. So our general plan is actually probably ahead of where we are.
We have more proposed. People are trying to figure out how to develop property in Parowan that has been tricky to develop because of unique characteristics. That's why it sits vacant. People are buying it and trying to figure out how to develop it. There's just a huge demand for housing right now, and so people are coming in and they're requesting to figure it out. And if our code isn't what we want it to be, then we're going to get whatever we have. And if somebody wants to use their land and their code permits it, then it'll happen, and that's fine. But anyways, so I think it's a good thing to kind of work through these and make sure that we're good. One of the things that I had talked about looking at was maybe adjusting our R2 code so that you could build a duplex in an R2 lot and have a common property line down the middle of the duplex, so that each side of the duplex could have separate ownership.
Like a twin home?
Like a twin home, but it could have separate ownership. That would allow, that's something that would not be much of an impact to the city. In R2, you would have duplexes, and it could make for much more, that's like one thing you could get some immediate affordability without selling the soul of the city, if so to speak. This is a suggestion by Jake Hewlett, who was on our board. And so there's some things like this I think that we ought to look at, is all I'm saying.
Dave?
I'm just going to reiterate that as we do this, we have got to take into consideration the integrity of Parowan and the desires of the citizens of Parowan as to what our city needs to be, not the state. The state is accusing the feds of their overreach and encroachment, and the state is being the same behavior. And we as a city have got a responsibility to protect the integrity of our city, and that's all I'm gonna say.
I don't see it as, we're not West Valley, we're not Salt Lake, we're not Park City. I see it as, we have citizens who want to be a part of our community that can't have a roof over their house or over their head. And I think those that want to be a part of Parowan, contribute to Parowan, because this is a great place, we should help them to be a part of our great town. And I can say our great town with only being a 3-year resident, because I claim it as well, even if I'm not a 5th generation Parowan. I have nothing else to report.
Thank you. And just, since we're headed down that path, and I think we're close to done here, I want to remind everybody here that we are the Planning and Zoning Commission. We are the spearhead for change, if there's going to be any. And it's really incumbent on the City Council to act on our recommendations. They have the option of following those recommendations or rejecting those recommendations. It's nice if we work closely together so that we don't go through a lot of work to just have it, set aside. But so just, keep that perspective in mind. Mm-hmm. Good point. And I've got nothing to report. Weston? I think we should fight back. Okay.
Do what, Weston?
I think we should fight back. You're empowered. Dig in.
Call your legislator.
Step right up.
Well, I have mixed emotions about it. I mean, I can see the pluses and minuses of all of this, and yes, I do believe it's going to take quite a bit of discussion. I absolutely agree with Dave that this community should be self-sufficient, and that we shouldn't be burdened by what people in different metropolitan areas expect us to do. This is a unique place to live. It's unique. I agree with Heather. We do have issues with affordable housing.
Housing in general, not even affordable.
Well, yeah.
Name one city that doesn't.
Yeah, right. So I mean, and this is just the tip of the iceberg that I can see with the United States economy, and anyway, on and on and on and on. I think this is going to take quite a bit of research and discussion, and I think that the end resolve will be to Parowan's benefit. I think all of us up here and the people that sit out there are true Parowanites, people who want to see us develop cautiously, and yet, with whatever word I'm looking for, it's with authority. Anyway, that's all I've got.
All right, there's one last motion.
I make a motion that we adjourn.
Do I have a second?
I second.
All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
I really feel like this is off. Do I not sound the same volume?
Oh, it's real quiet to me too.
No, they're not on.
We're gonna have to reboot it. I don't know why.
We'll have to call a sound man.
The volume is
Sometimes
super low.
it doesn't. I turned it all up.
Thank you. Good meeting.
interesting, yes.
Dave, you seem really bothered. I hope you know, I'm
So what?
Is I turned it off, and then when I said that,
just a real.
I'm like, it's off, and it sounds the same volume.
Weston, thanks for coming. I don't know what happened to James.
Organize the group, Lolly, and I'm gonna contact them tomorrow to see where we're at.
So, and they, no, they're, I know that.
And I really felt like everybody was very low, and we had this problem
But if somebody comes in and